guys, and welcome to Gearist TV. On today's episode, from Mizuno Running, the Wave Sayonara! Let's talk about the outsole. One of the first things I do when I get a new pair of shoes to test is I take it on a wide variety of terrain. There's actually a really great run pretty near me that's got hard pack, it's got technical trail, and then it's got road. The reason I want to take it on those off-road terrains right away, especially if it's a road shoe, is because some of the tread patterns and some of the traction features may wear down a little bit over time if I'm running that shoe on the road, and I want to see how they handle new straight out of the box. The outsole of the Mizuno Wave Sayonara has this little medial side panel of kind of nubs, and these actually do a really great job. I was actually looking at them right out of the box and it looked kind of like a cleat, and they feel a little bit like that. Not so much like a track spike, but like a cleat. I'll hold them up there a little bit so you can get a better look in the camera. So these are actually made from a kind of hard rubber. They're overlaying the euphoric foam, which is something that we'll talk about here in a second. They give really fantastic traction on like a hard pack trail, a fire road, or something like that. When you get onto a more technical trail, it's not going to hold as well because, first off, this is a road shoe, not a trail shoe. And secondly, these are much too small to really be gripping larger rocks and technical terrain. Another really great feature is the fact that the outsole and the midsole both extend well beyond the profile of the upper, as you can see here. What that does, it gives a nice wide base for people to really feel very secure when moving laterally in this shoe. It's definitely something that's going to add a tiny bit of weight, but with the advent of euphoric foam, you're saving about 30% of the weight over its predecessor, a P+ foam that was used in previous Mizuno models, so you're not really sacrificing very much, if anything at all. Another thing that I really like is the whole foot contact you feel from the heel to the forefoot. Myself, I'm a mid-foot to forefoot striker when I land on the ground, and so I really want to feel the entire foot. Many shoes, there's a gap in between the forefoot panel and the heel panel, so there's kind of something missing there. And if you're looking for a lot of ground feel, which a lot of runners are because they want that cushion, that whole foot feel, this part right here on the medial side, the lateral side, and then again here on the medial side where you can see this bit of EVA that's gone forward, that is really going to make for a very consistent feel from the heel to the forefoot. So whether you're landing on the heel of this shoe or you're landing on the forefoot, you're certainly going to get that entire ground feel front to back with no sacrificing or kind of dead spots in the middle. Now let's talk about the midsole. Historically, Mizuno's had some pretty tall stack heights being how high the shoe sits up off the ground. However, with the advent, again, of the euphoric foam, this stuff right here, they're able to get away with having less stack, mainly because this foam is 30% lighter, more resilient, and provides more rebound and cushioning. Now, why that makes difference is because it still puts the foot in much closer contact to the ground, which is something that a lot of runners are seeking out. There's certainly a shift toward minimalism, as we've seen in the past few years, but with this shoe, they want to provide that cushion. This is by no means a minimalist shoe. You're certainly going to feel the cushion that you would in a more traditional running shoe, but it's going to set you more close to the ground, which is going to give you much more, again, ground feel, as I mentioned in the outsole section of this review. Let's talk about Mizuno's trademark technology, the Wave. Here in this shoe, you can see that it sits in the heel. It starts right at the rear of the foot and ends right under kind of the middle of the midfoot there. The Wave is meant to have shock put upon it and then dissipate all the impact forces away from the shoe and away from the foot. Now, being a forefoot to midfoot lander when I run, this is something that I wasn't fully able to take complete advantage of in this shoe, mainly because I didn't really land on my heel. I did force myself to land there a couple of times, and it certainly does what it advertises. It certainly cushions and protects the impact of the foot as it lands on the ground. Now, as a forefoot runner, midfoot runner, whole foot runner, one of the things that I did like about the Wave, and I was able to take advantage of, is that when my foot landed kind of midfoot, and then the heel began to settle back down for that elastic recoil off the ground, it really gave a nice loading place because the Wave eased out of the way. It was actually really great, gave me fantastic ground feel front to back, and regardless of the cushion, didn't deaden my feel of the ground, which is something that I was quite surprised by. So the sock liner of the Sayonara is actually really pretty thin. It's pretty minimal at all. does have a little bit of perforation, which is going to add a little bit of flexibility as well as some additional ventilation of the foot from the bottom, which is nice. Even though it's so thin, it actually also sits atop a really pretty padded strobel board. That's this part right in here. It's pretty firm underneath, but there is a little bit of cushioning on top of the strobel board, which is going to add to the overall cushioning feel of the shoe. Truly one of my favorite parts of the Sayonara is the upper. Now, most companies these days are moving away from a lot of stitching and things like that on the upper, from traditional strapping of a shoe. And they're moving toward more heat welded or heat molded support structure of a shoe. On this, you can see that all these kind of what look like decals and things like that, they're heat molded, heat bonded to the shoe. So they're providing that structure while being kind of a part of the upper. It's a really nice way to save weight. It's a nice way to stay very, very sleek looking and really have a nice line to the shoe. In fact, the only stitches on this shoe are here on the foxing and here on the medial side logo, and just a little bit kind of right up here around the throat. And I'm actually curious as to why there's no stitching on the the lateral logo. It's simply heat molded or heat bonded to the shoe. But on the medial side, it's stitched on. It's kind of interesting. Not sure why, but whatever. The heel counter on the Sayonara, that's right there. The heel counter is actually fairly substantial, where a lot of heel counters will cut right about there. This extends to the very front of the heel to the back of the midfoot, kind of potato. It does add a lot of secure feeling in the rear foot, and that's something that some people, they really look for, especially those that have a more narrow heel. Now, in this case, it's certainly going to be something that you're going to want if you're on a technical run. Not necessarily technical terrain, but just to run with a lot of side-to-side movement, and that may be on a more technical terrain. The upper itself is actually quite breathable. While it's not the most breathable thing I've ever worn, and I think that's because it's backed with a kind of tightly woven mesh, it certainly does a great job. You may get a little hot on some really quite warm days, but in general it's not such a big deal, I notice, and I do tend to run pretty hot. One thing that I have noticed about the Sayonara, as well as another Mizuno model that I've tried since trying this one for the first time, is that in the forefoot area, right up here, there's not a ton of room of vertical volume in the shoe. I'm not sure why that is. It does make it for a very kind of race-like feel, almost like a slipper-like feel. However, if you're one who likes to kind of expand and curl your toes around and move your toes, not necessarily while you're running, but just have that freedom, you may be a little hard-pressed to find it. For me, what I did was remove the sock liner, and again, while the sock liner is pretty minimal, it's going to provide that little bit of extra volume that you may feel that you need if the vertical volume is a little too limiting for you. Let's talk about the fit for a second. Very, very true to size. Over the past year or so, I've been moving from a 10.5 to a size 11. This is an 11 and fits very, very comfortably. I have plenty of room in front of my toe like I would want to, and as I mentioned earlier, there's not a lot of vertical volume in the shoe rather, but there is plenty of horizontal volume. There's plenty of place for your foot to expand, which if you're someone who's kind of a foot biomechanics nerd like myself, you really want to see the foot have the ability to expand as it lands on the ground, and this does provide that in spades. It's also got that expanded forefoot outsole and midsole that I mentioned, which is going to further support a wider foot as it begins to expand over those areas. Now let's talk about the ride. The very first thing that really kind of just I was taken aback by with the Sayonara is that it was cushy. And for a moment, I was like, oh, well, this is so cushy that I'm sacrificing a little bit of ground feel. But that is not the case at all. And I was surprised by that. Since they were able to get away with a thinner amount of foam due to the new euphoric foam, they also were able to keep the ground feel where they want it to be. This foam provides a lot of cushioning, but still, because there's less of it, it allows you to really be in touch with the ground. One thing that's also remarkable is that when the foot lands on the ground, this shoe is really well balanced. Now what that means for me is that the balance from the heel to the forefoot is really well set off. They complement each other very well because there's such a distinct connection between the two on both the medial and the lateral outsole and midsole. Additionally, when the foot lands on the ground, there's this nice wide outsole and midsole right here for the foot to land on. That provides a really stable, really wide platform, and again allows that foot to expand and adds a lot of really nice balance to the shoe. Due to its really sleek lines and its almost kind of slippery racing flat type feel, especially over the forefoot, the Sayonara really is a fast feeling shoe and actually is pretty fast from my experience. It's actually also pretty light. The size 11 that I have here came in at 9.3 ounces, which is definitely heavier than most racing flats, especially like the Wave Universe, or excuse me, the Universe 5, I think it is, that comes in at like 2.8 ounces or some nonsense like that, which is just nonsense in a good way. But it's got a racing flatty feel, and I really can appreciate that very much, but it's also got the cushioning and it's got the durability of a more workhorse-oriented shoe. The Sayonara is definitely a shoe that I would consider wearing in anything from a marathon all the way down to a 5K, and including some things like half marathon on trail or something like that. As long as the terrain is not too technical or too rocky, this shoe is definitely going to be something that's going to give you a lot of traction because A, of its balance, and B, these little nubbies under the medial forefoot. This is a really nice shoe. It's a workhorse shoe, and it's going to be a lot of things to a lot of people. It's going to be a training shoe, a racing shoe, a speed shoe, a tempo shoe, you name it. I have a feeling that this is a shoe that we're going to see around for a long time, and if the Sayonara itself isn't around for a long time, certainly the technology behind it is something that's going to not be going anywhere for a really, really long time. At $120, I really do feel like the Sayonara is a really nicely priced shoe. It's right in the meat of what most runners consider to be a pretty good price point. Not so expensive as to be prohibitive, and it's definitely a shoe that you're going to get a lot of miles for your money. The Sayonara is really a shoe that's going to be a lot of things to a lot of people. As I mentioned earlier, it's going to be your 26.2 shoe, it's going to be your 5K shoe, your turkey trot shoe, your speed shoe, your light trail shoe. It's going to be a shoe that's really going to be a workhorse. More importantly, what I think it is an advancement and really well thought out innovation from a very venerable brand in Mizuno. Look for technology from this shoe to last and be around for a long time and actually make way for further advancements from this brand moving on down the road. Thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Gearist TV. Don't forget to visit us at gearist.com and please subscribe to this lovely channel. If you enjoy it, if you have a question or a comment, leave them in the comments section below. And give us a like, that would be great. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time.
As always, thank you guys so much for watching this episode of Gearist TV. Please click on over to find us at Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And while you're here, please click on that beautiful blue subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you next time.